This is episode 384 of That Shakespeare Life.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Nicholson, researcher of early modern French and English on the early modern stage. Another great method for studying the life of William Shakespeare includes listening to this. It's That Shakespeare Life with my friend Cassidy Cash.
Welcome to That Shakespeare Life with Cassidy Cash. Cassidy believes that if you desire to successfully learn or perform Shakespeare's plays, then understanding the real life and history of William Shakespeare himself is a must. That Shakespeare Life is the podcast that helps you go beyond the curtain of some of Shakespeare's most iconic works and explore the world of early modern England as Shakespeare would have lived it, learning from the writers, historians, and performers who know it best. And now, here's Cassidy.
I think this be the most villanous house in all London road for fleas. I'm stung like a tench. So complains one of Shakespeare's characters in the Merry Wives of Windsor, voicing what was surely a common frustration in the 16th and 17th centuries. Fleas were an ever-present part of daily life, so much so that they appeared in poems, jokes, love songs, and Shakespeare himself talks about them at least 7 times across his plays, to condemn them, joke about them, and even insult people with them. Today, we're turning our attention to these tiny tormentors to explore what their presence tells us about the hygiene, health, and humor of the early modern world. To help us scratch the surface of this itchy topic, we're delighted to welcome historian Andrea Zuvich. Andrea Zuvich is an independent 17th century historian, historical consultant, and author known for her popular work, The 17th Century Lady. She has published several historical novels and nonfiction works, including A Year in the Life of Stuart Britain. Andrea is a trusted voice for bringing the early modern period vividly to life for her modern readers and audiences. Her historical blog and social media outreach have inspired thousands to learn more about daily life in the 1600s. You can learn more about Andrea's work and connect with her directly using the links provided in the show notes for today's episode. Before we get started, I want to remind you that you can follow along during our conversation to explore visual extras for today's show, including early modern illustrations of flea combs, 17th century woodcuts that talk about pests, and period sources describing how Shakespeare's contemporaries managed infestations. All of these extras are available for patrons of That Shakespeare Life. Sign up or log in right now at cassidycash.com/episode 384 to see all the extras while you listen to the show. And now, let's dive into the history. Hello, Andrea. Welcome to That Shakespeare Life.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me here.
In Shakespeare's play, Henry IV, Part 1, he writes that a house is considered, quote, villanous because it contains more fleas than anywhere else in London. In another play, Shakespeare writes that a man will die, quote, a flea's death. That comes from Merry Wives of Windsor. And of course, John Donne, though published after Shakespeare's death, wrote a poem in the 17th century all about the flea. Why were fleas considered such great fodder for these poems and poetry from this time period?
Well, fleas and other parasites such as lice were extremely common during the early modern period and affected all ages, sexes, and classes. It didn't matter if people were rich or poor. All had to deal with these irritating and sometimes deadly insects. Something that affects everyone is bound to be included in artistic creations of the day, such as poetry. So it's no surprise that throughout Shakespeare's time and further into the 17th century or the Stuart period, which is my specialty, you'll find many paintings which depict the act of the removal of lice with a comb or people's daily search for fleas on themselves or their loved ones. And this reminds me, there's a painting from circa 1665 by Gerard Terboche entitled A Boy Ridding His Dog of Fleas. And it shows a boy about 10 years old with his dog, a spaniel, I think, on his lap. And the boy's in the act of parting the dog's hair to search for fleas. And it's an amazing little snapshot of a time that everyone from the period could relate to. And I find that quite endearing in a way.
That's adorable. And what dedication, because that's no small feat to get that many fleas off of a dog. What kinds of places were most infested with fleas? I mean, was it the bed or the clothing or even the rushes on the floor? Were there certain areas that were known to be worse than others when it came to fleas?
Well, first and foremost, fleas were everywhere and a part of everyday life. There's Samuel Pepys was an important figure from the 17th century. And he had a diary in which he wrote about his everyday experiences and observations throughout the 1660s. And that is so incredibly useful for those of us who write about the period. On the 3rd of September, 1664, he wrote, "I have had a bad night's rest tonight, not sleeping well, as my wife observed, and once or twice she did wake me, and I thought myself to be mightily bit with fleas, and in the morning she chid her maids for not looking the fleas a days." And so although this particular incident was probably not flea-related, the fact that Pepys and his wife Elizabeth assumed his itchiness was flea-related, and they were annoyed with what they saw as a dereliction of duty on the part of their maids, who should have been going around the bed linen and inspecting and killing any fleas that were found, says a lot. And so I do think that you would have more of a problem with these parasites in your bedding. I mean, you'd be there for many hours, and so they had more time to get to you. And that was usually it's the clothes, whatever's closest to a person. However, some writings from the time do say that there would have been fleas being a problem in the rushes. And so they could live anywhere, pretty much.
What were the most common beliefs about how they spread in the 16th and 17th century? Did people connect them to filth or bad air, or were there other theories about where they were coming from or how you could contract them?
You know, it's funny. There doesn't appear to have been a general consensus on how fleas spread, but there was a popular notion that they would bite some people more than others. For example, on the 23rd of April, 1662, Samuel Pepys wrote, "The doctor and I lay together at Ward's, the surgeon's in Portsmouth, his wife a very pretty woman. We lay very well and merrily. In the morning, concluding him to be of the eldest blood and house of the Clarks, because that all the fleas came to him and not to me." This gives us insight into what early modern people thought of fleas. And here we have a clearly amused Samuel Pepys, glad he hadn't been bitten, unlike his bedmate, who he reckoned had to be the eldest of his family, as those persons were believed to be more attractive to fleas. I mean, this is nonsense, of course, but people from that period certainly did believe that foul air spread disease. And this is important, and because they thought that this could be combated by burning nice-smelling herbs or any kind of smoke. They even went so far as to encourage children to smoke tobacco in an attempt to protect them from these evil and dangerous smells. I know this may sound completely bizarre to us now, as we know that smoking is not a healthful activity, and we often discourage adults and especially children from smoking, but there it is.
I can't imagine, but I think this makes so much more sense now why the flea gets used as an insult, because there were these beliefs about, oh, well, they're getting you more. Well, you must be the oldest. I think that's hilarious. We know today that there's a direct connection between flea and disease, like plague. But was there this understanding of relationship between fleas and disease for Shakespeare's lifetime?
Well, people at this time simply didn't know that fleas transmitted disease. They were a daily nuisance, but nothing more, really. Again, they tended to think that plague and disease were spread by pestilential airs and so forth. Like the widespread outbreak of bubonic plague, which devastated England's population between 1348 and 1350, the Great Plague of 1664 or 1665 was called by the Bacillus Yersinia pestis. Plague is spread from animals such as rats and possibly other rodents. I mean, there was this study that came out, I think, about 10 years ago, and they concluded that gerbils were also to blame. So we're not completely sure, but that's a possibility. And so they are spread from animals to humans via the bite of a flea. And once bitten by the plague-carrying flea, an infected person would exhibit symptoms such as fever, vomiting, and strange swellings called buboes, usually found on the armpits, the neck, and the groin. Plague was especially virulent in tightly packed, insalubrious dwellings, which were usually the lot of the poorer of Stuart society who lived in cities. Now, I live near a village called Eyam here in Derbyshire, England. And that was the site of a terrible outbreak of plague in the 1660s. And it is believed to have come into the village by a parcel containing contaminated clothing, which likely had plague-carrying fleas. So this village successfully quarantined themselves, and that did prevent the plague from spreading to nearby villages, although many in Eyam they contracted this and died. And during the 17th century, there were great advancements in natural philosophy, which eventually became what we call science today. And one of the great men involved in this was Robert Hooke. And he published a hugely important work called Micrographia. And among other things, this book contained a large, like a blown up image of a flea. And this was a remarkable achievement. And you could see how this everyday parasite was a source of curiosity. And these great learned minds of the time were interested in knowing the ins and outs of this very remarkable insect.
What other methods were used to manage or get rid of fleas? You mentioned a flea comb, but did people use any kind of fumigants, poisons, or specific herbal repellents?
Well, I can't really find much about that, but maybe I should talk about how I had a similar situation where some years ago with my cat, when I lived in London, my cat had not much. We didn't have anything in terms of modern cat parasite treatment. And I thought everything would be okay if she would just get brushed, but no, and combed. But no, that didn't happen. She certainly had a terrible infestation. And so for those of us who have experienced flea infestations, you'll have found little black clumps on your bedding and on your night clothes. And this is detritus or flea excrement. And when this touches liquid, these clumps become bloody. So that's delightful, isn't it? But from
yes.
what...
I don't even have appropriate words for that.
Yeah. Well, from what I gathered from reading a 17th century natural philosopher's work, Antony von Leeuwenhoek's study on fleas, he stated that we may conclude that if in places where fleas abound, the floors or pavements be well wetted with water, the maggots may be destroyed and consequently the places cleared of fleas. So that started me thinking I should do something with water, right?
It sounds like mopping. Like he's suggesting that you mop the floor.
Well, if we think about rushes on the floor, if that got wet, that would help with an infestation during this period. But for now, in 21st century London, I found that having a lit candle in the middle of a bowl of water was a great trap. And it's because the fleas were attracted to the flame and jumped into the water and couldn't get easily out. So they would find flea corpses floating around the next morning. And it got me thinking that perhaps some Stuart era people might have done the same when they got so absolutely annoyed by having this. They might have done something similar. And because it seems a pretty simple thing to do, and it was very effective, oddly enough. Yeah.
I am sorry that you had to face this. What a trial. But it's a neat little historical experiment to consider, what might have happened, and to see some of them be effective when it's not what we would turn to immediately today. Yes. But they did apparently have some remedies at their disposal.
Yeah. Well, combs were used during the 16th and 17th centuries to comb hair and search hair for lice and fleas. We have very fine-tooth combs now for pets, and of course, knit combs to help remove parasites. And I believe that a proper flea trap was designed by a German doctor, Franz Bruckmann, who was born in the late 17th century. And this was in the form of a sort of cylindrical capsule, and it had holes all over it that was filled with cloth and smeared with some blood to lure any fleas, and it was hung from a ribbon and worn on a person's clothing or around their neck. But once inside, the fleas would get stuck to honey resin or fat that was also inside the capsule, and being stuck there, they would then die. But this is more of an early 18th century thing, but it shows the ingenuity people had in their quest to find ways to get rid of these pests.
Motivation is the mother of invention, after all.
Indeed, it is. Yes.
Did any medical text from this period recommend treatments for flea bites? I mean, once you're itchy and bitten, you obviously have, physical reactions to that. Are there any sources that offer advice on what to do once you've been bitten?
Well, there were a number of self-help books or, a sort of Stuart era how-to, household management books. Now, one of them was perhaps Gervase Markham's The English Housewife, which was published in 1615. I've been through that so many times. It's a go-to book. But that doesn't explicitly mention fleas or any treatments for flea bites. But there is some rather unwise advice on how to treat any scabs or itches, in that it says, for scabs, take unguentum populium, and therewith anoint the party, and it will help. But if it be more strong and rank, take an ounce of neuro oil and 3 pennyworth of quicksilver, and beat and work them together until you see that assuredly the quicksilver is killed. And then let the party anoint therewith the palms of his hands, the bows at his elbows, his armpits and hams, and it will cure all his body. Well, we now know that the cosmetics of this period were very dangerous, as they contained toxic ingredients, so this is no different. So please, I really wouldn't recommend Markham's advice here. Please do not handle mercury.
Yeah, exactly. Read for entertainment, but do not try this at home.
Yes. However, there are perhaps some natural things that people might have tried. Even now, if you were to look up natural herbal repellents for fleas, you'll find rosemary mentioned. Now, rosemary has been an important herb throughout history since it was brought here to the UK by the Romans when they occupied Britain, I believe. This said, I haven't had any experience with using it to combat fleas, but what most people in the early modern period would have done was the age-old search, catch, and crush technique.
Tried, but true. It definitely would get rid of them.
It works.
Well, I know that we would love to explore this history further and to find out more about some of these manuals we've mentioned, as well as the diary entries and all of these things. Where should we begin if we're new to this part of history and we'd like to learn more?
Well, I would definitely suggest the many diaries and letters from this period, which are a treasure trove of information on the everyday minutiae of the times. I mean, you can read all the secondary works about any time period by your favorite historian, but nothing, and I tell you, nothing beats going directly to the primary sources and getting a feel for what people truly thought and experienced straight from them in their own words, be it bug bites or what have you. It's priceless and utterly rewarding. I mean, over the past 15 years or so, I've collected documents and books from the 17th century. And so now I have something like, it is the 17th century lady archives. So I'm quite a fan of collecting primary documents and learning as much as I can from them.
I second this absolutely as a wonderful place to go. And what's fun about living in the 21st century is a lot of these primary documents are available online in digital archives for you to be able to see from wherever you are. So you don't have to make the trek to the British Library if you live here in the US, where that's not, just a hop, skip, and a jump down the road. It's quite a ways to get over there, but you can find those online. And definitely we will link to the 17th Century Lady website as well. So you can check with Andrea's work and see all that she's put together there for you. So stay tuned for the URL for where to find those. Andrea, we ask everyone this next question here at That Shakespeare Life, and that's, what's the one book you would take with you on a deserted island? My friends in England tell me I'm supposed to allow you the complete works of Shakespeare and a copy of the Bible, so your choice would be in addition to those.
Right. Well, your friends are correct. And I am very happy with a copy of both of those monumentally important books. And some of your listeners who have watched my history show, Stuart Saturday Live, know Shakespeare's works have been profoundly significant in my life. I was led into the Stuart period because of my love of Shakespeare. But to answer your question, I would also request the most complete version of the Diary of Samuel Pepys available. So that means with all the naughty bits included. So all of that would keep me completely happily entertained on that desert island for the rest of my days.
I think you would be well set up. Absolutely. I can't imagine being able to pour through all of those and compare them side by side. Yes, it would be a source of great entertainment. And how much fun that Shakespeare got you into what you're doing now. I did not know that. I'm going to go watch Stuart Saturday Live and hear this story in full.
It's so wonderful.
What's next for you? What are you working on now that you're excited about?
Oh, I'm excited about lots and lots of things because history is everything. I've mainly been focusing on my role as one of the founders of the Stuart History Festival, which will be an in-person and also live-streamed event at the Old Palace by Worcester Cathedral in Worcester, England on the 5th and 6th of July. I have several projects on the go as well, including a biography of Queen Mary II, who lived from 1662 to 1694, a children's book entitled The Super Stuarts Activity Book, and Shakespeare will be in that too. But also, I have been working on a novel based on one of Shakespeare's plays. So we'll see how that goes.
Which play? Can you tell us?
I'm not going to say because it'll give it away.
That's okay. We will link to Andrea Zuvich's website this week so you can follow along and find out when the name of that play is revealed. And we're so excited to hear about your project. I think activity books are fantastic and such a wonderful way to engage children in learning about history. So we will look forward to all the fun things coming from the 17th century lady. Thank you so much, Andrea, for being here and sharing this bit of history with us. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
With that last skip through the pest-ridden past, we bid farewell to today's tale. A hearty thanks to Andrea Zuvich for guiding us through the tiny, itchy realities of early modern life. To learn more about our guest and explore the resources mentioned in today's conversation, including related podcast episodes and more information on Andrea and her work, visit the show notes at CassidyCash.com/episode 384. While you're there, you can also unlock the visual extras for this episode, like period records of fleas, woodcuts, artifacts, and more, by clicking any of the Patreon buttons available on the page. And if you're ready to go beyond the episode and try your hand at Renaissance cooking, games, and crafts that we talk about here on the show, members of Experience Shakespeare on Patreon can download a full activity kit that walks you through how to cook, play, and build some of the items from the 16th and 17th century, just the way it would have been done in Shakespeare's lifetime. Visit our Patreon links and click on Experience Shakespeare to get started. Again, that URL to where to find all these insider extras is CassidyCash.com/episode 384. That's CassidyCash.com/EP384. That Shakespeare Life is researched and produced by me, Cassidy Cash. Our audio engineer is Gary Mayholm. Until next time, may your linens be clean, your breeches unbitten, and your household free from all hopping intruders. Thank you for listening. I'm Cassidy Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to That Shakespeare Life. As always, the best conversations happen after the episode over at CassidyCash.com. Become a part of a vibrant Shakespeare conversation by adding your voice over at the website. Until next time, remember, when you want to know William Shakespeare, you have to go behind the curtain and into That Shakespeare Life.